It's looking like Amy Coney Barrett is going to be the next Supreme Court justice, but it's not done yet. You have to look and see what the schedule is, and it's supposed to get reopened in a sense this Thursday. That's when the Senate can begin consideration. And then there's a whole bunch of Senate procedure stuff that comes into play, and they can if they try to filibuster, there can be a motion to cloture and, to end it, and then they have another day and they got to reconsider. And it can basically go from Thursday, assuming the Democrats try whatever procedural blocks they can, and I think that's likely, just so they can show how upset they are. It can't really stop the process, but it can delay it, and they can give more speeches, and Cory Booker can look like he's going to cry at any moment. I don't know what it is. He always seems like he's about to cry. So that's what's likely to happen. Thursday opens up. Friday, there's some process stuff. They can reopen on Saturday, and then I think Sunday is when it might actually be official and in the books. This coming Sunday. So right before Election Day, we may be in a place where you have a new Supreme Court justice, Sunday the 25th. That's all assuming that things go as planned. Now, so far, they haven't been able to come up with anything on Amy Coney Barrett to stop it. That's obvious. ACB's nomination has been moving along. And I have been surprised that the Democrats honestly haven't made more noise about this. One idea that I have about this, one theory, is that they're so set on packing the court that it doesn't really bother them as much now. They've just said, okay, fine, you get ACB through. We're going to add 2 or 3 more liberal, far left Supreme Court justices. So who even really cares in the meantime? So I think that may be a part of it. But there was this comment that Pelosi made over the weekend about what she may be able to do about this nomination. Play 10.
Last time we spoke, you said Democrats had arrows in their quiver to block this nomination, but she seems like she's on a path to confirmation right now. Is this a done deal, or is there still something Democrats can do to stop it?
Well, we'll see. I'm not in the Senate. I don't. What I'm talking about is how we win this election, because we have to offset whatever the outcome of this, whatever this court may do, and the Congress of the United States can overturn these bad decisions. For example, the court just did one on the census. The census is a disagreement we have in this bill. This is very important, who we are as a nation, and yet the court just agreed with the president to stop the census. So again, because we want to have an agreement, we can come to negotiation, and we can do it now. What's the difference, a few days, except that we could have it before the election, which we want it as soon as possible.
Sounds to me like Nancy doesn't want to tell the left-wing base there, sorry, we're out of options here. And there's also a part of me that refuses to believe that Democrats are going to go quietly on this one. And I know maybe I have post-Kavanaugh trauma syndrome or something. Maybe I just can't come to accept that they're going to allow this process to play out. It does go to show you that when the Democrats don't have a white male Republican to attack, so much of their usual machinery of destruction is neutralized. Something to keep in mind going forward for any kind of cabinet positions or Supreme Court justices, anybody that needs Senate confirmation. They're not as good. I mean, if it's a guy who's Republican, Christian, and conservative, then we know what they'll come at him with. They'll find someone to lie about a sexual impropriety from 30 years ago, or find 10 people to lie about it, whatever it may be. With a woman, though, doesn't seem like they have quite the same playbook to run. So Nancy's sounding here like they don't have anything left, and folks, I think some of you know, you're probably already at the place where you think, Buck, it's fine. She's going to get through, and what a big win for the Trump administration right before the election. Gosh, I hope all those evangelicals and all those cultural conservative Christians who, if they ever had any doubts about Trump, they see what's going on here with the courts alone and feel like that was the bargain in 2016 for a lot of them. And Trump on judges has come through on that bargain and then some. Three conservative constitutionalists on the high court, never mind the roughly 25-30% now, I think, of federal judges that are Trump appointees, or some number. It's a huge number. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it's bigly. And I think that ACB is going to be, I think she's going to be the best of Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. I think ACB will be the strongest with adhering to the Constitution, although you never know until they get in there. You know, Bush gave us Roberts, and what a disappointment that has been for anybody who believes that the law is what the law says. So we'll see about that. And then since we're talking about Pelosi, she just said yesterday during some of the Sunday interviews, she said this on ABC, that there's a 48-hour deadline here to get a coronavirus relief package done by Election Day, which, as I said, is 15 days away. So she's saying that she's hopeful that they'll get something done. She's claiming that this is something that, may still happen. So Pelosi and Mnuchin have been negotiating for months trying to get a coronavirus package done. They passed a $3 trillion. This is the Democrats in the House passed a $3 trillion package back in May that the Senate did not take up. The White House has offered $1.8 trillion. Think about all that money, all the stuff that would be helpful for, all the people that would start getting those. I mean, $600 a week, that's a lifeline for people right now economically. Folks who have lost their jobs because of government policy. Folks who don't have their business operating or open because of government policy. But Pelosi won't give this win to Trump unless it will be considered a Pelosi win first and foremost. The people who are suffering in the meantime mean nothing to her. Now, Mitch McConnell is also going to call a vote this week on a $500 billion bill that I believe is mostly or entirely about paycheck protection, PPP. But Pelosi wants to play games. It's just a reminder that while Democrats tell you, and one of their central themes, central messages, is how much they care about working class people, those who are just trying to make ends meet. And when working class people in a moment like this are really suffering, Pelosi wants to play high-level political games. And there's a lot of ego involved in it, too. You may have seen recently that Trump and Pelosi don't really mix so well. They don't really like each other. I mean, it is personal for them. I mean, Trump goes after Nancy pretty hard, and she goes after Trump viciously. She doesn't care at all. Why is there not a deal? Because Democrats want to spend too much money, and they want to spend too much money on things that don't have to do with COVID. They want bailouts for cities that have been Democrat-run for a long time, and she's just not willing, or rather Trump's just not willing to go forward with that, neither are the Republicans. And this is where I'd also remind everyone that I know it's not really in vogue to talk about this right now. I know this doesn't really get a lot of claps, a lot of cheers, because it's depressing, but we're going to spend, the federal government is going to spend $6 trillion this year alone. $6 trillion. We have doubled our national government spending. And the bill for this, man, you may not feel it right now, but it's real. And it's certainly going to be on your children or your grandchildren. But there's going to be I think there's going to be some stormy seas ahead for the economy as a result of this. I know it's emergency measures, but we're going to be at $30 trillion of debt here very soon. And the real moment of change for everybody is when we can't sell our debt on the global market the same way. Our treasuries, U.S. treasuries, are not as desirable or reliable because other countries and the global markets don't believe that they're really going to pay back these obligations. And all of a sudden we lose not all of a sudden, it would be slowly then suddenly, we would lose our reserve currency status. Then all of a sudden the fight we have going on with China feels very imminent, doesn't it? Then things change quite a bit. And we are in a struggle to keep our number one position of global dominance, and a struggle that we may not win because we've spent ourselves into oblivion. But I know we got an election to win, so people don't really want to hear about that right now. I recently got a crash course in home title theft. You better hope this crime never happens to you. You see, it goes after your most valuable asset, your home, and it can ruin you financially. Here's what happens. The legal title to your home is online. It's stored in servers up in the cloud. A cyber thief hacks into this, finds your home's title, forges your signature on a quitclaim deed, and then they state that you sold your home to them. The loans are taken out against your home until your equity's gone and you're left in debt. Sometimes you won't even find out about this until a foreclosure notice comes in the mail. You won't know about this from the usual identity theft services. You have to go with Home Title Lock. Home Title Lock will create a virtual barrier around your home's title. The instant they detect tampering, they'll shut it down. Go to HometitleLock.com and use the promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. You can also register your address to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it. That's HometitleLock.com, code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. About a year and a half ago now when I was in China, and I remember being told by friends of mine who cover it, friends that I talked to who had been at high levels of the government and on the intel side, just what do I need to expect? And there was something ominous about all the recommendations, all the procedures. You know, I went in there sterile on my devices, so I didn't bring a phone with me, which I got to tell you, that's really... It's disorienting when you no longer have phone with email and your contacts and internet and you're in a foreign country. I didn't bring my phone. I didn't even bring a Kindle with me. I just brought hard copy books. I didn't want anything that had circuits, anything that could carry a program of any kind because the Chinese government has built this massive surveillance system. And as a former CIA officer and somebody who is now in the media, I had a feeling that, as crazy as this may sound, I was told this by high-level people who would know, they're definitely going to be monitoring you, and they may be sending some unrequested gifts home with you to continue to monitor you. You know, it's no problem for them. Easy enough to do. And then there was also one person in particular who said, look, I'm not telling you not to go. People go to China all the time. They're Americans doing business there. You know, I'm not getting into some panic mode here, right? I have friends who have lived in China who are Americans, and you know they've had pretty good experience there overall. But he said it's only a matter of time before the Chinese government starts detaining Americans as a bargaining chip. This is what happened, and this is the kind of thing that you saw during the Cold War with the Soviets, where people they'd say, oh, this person's government related, or this person was doing some kind of either spying or just there's some problem. And they start holding your foreign nationals from your country, foreign nationals to them, as bargaining chips. Well, that was a warning that I was told 18 months ago. And now the Chinese government has that warning out there for all of us. China's saying it may detain Americans in response to prosecutions of Chinese scholars. This is the piece in the Wall Street Journal. Chinese government officials are warning their American counterparts they may detain U.S. nationals in China in response to the Justice Department's prosecution of Chinese military-affiliated scholars, according to people familiar with the matter. The Chinese officials have issued the warnings to U.S. government representatives repeatedly and through multiple channels, including through the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. The Chinese message has been blunt. The U.S. should drop prosecutions of the Chinese scholars in American courts, or Americans in China may suddenly find themselves in violation of Chinese law. This is going to happen. They're going to start doing this. So let's understand how we got to this point. China has been ripping off U.S. intellectual property, research and development, engaging in all forms of espionage that it can, with almost no consequences, stretching back now for at least 20 or 30 years. And the overall theft, especially a lot of it being cyber, but some of it's in person, a lot of it's cyber theft. But the overall theft of information, I think, between the U.S. and China, what they've stolen from us, is the greatest theft of information. And when I say greatest, I mean the most impactful, the largest by volume, the most widespread of any information transfer in history. There's never been anything like this before. And it could be civilization changing over the long run, meaning that our information and knowledge advantage over the Chinese will be less and less over time. Now, there are people who will say, but Buck, we have our dynamic and innovative systems, and that's why we have the information advantage over the Chinese. That's true, but that advantage gets smaller and smaller when they're just stealing the results of research, when they're just stealing the results of what makes our companies so successful. And then they try to build and replicate them on their own. So that's been going on for a long time. Here, in this specific instance, what the Chinese have been doing is actually not their ongoing massive cyber theft against us, but they send people to U.S. universities who are posing as scholars, but it turns out they're actually tied to the Chinese government. And we find out that they're looking at something very specific, and they're trying to steal information. They're trying to get stuff that they're not supposed to get to. The Chinese have already gone after some Canadians. They, in June of this year, indicted 2 Canadians on espionage charges, and that was seen as retribution for Canada's arrest of a Chinese executive at Huawei in conjunction with a U.S. extradition request. So they've already slapped at the Canadians a little bit here. Can you imagine being held on a fake but still terrifying espionage charge in China? That's really, really bad news. You would not want to be in that situation. But this is what's going to happen. The Chinese like the way things have been. They like the one-way information war, the one-way trade war. They like that our elites, including the Bidens, oh yes, see how we bring it all full circle? As long as they were getting their payoffs, as long as they had their access and the cash flowing into them, they were willing to tell us all, oh, the richer China is, the better. The more wealth and influence the Chinese government has in this country, the better it is for everybody. China will liberalize. China will become more liberal as it gets deeper roots in the international financial system and is able to engage in global trade on a larger, more frequent basis, or greater volume. It's going to make it a better country. That's what they told us. No, it just made it a larger, more powerful, more aggressive country. Hasn't made it a more liberal country. That has not occurred. And there's no reason to believe it will occur anytime soon. The Chinese people, and I remember this from my time there and speaking to both scholars and businessmen who were Chinese, the Chinese people feel a tremendous pride in the rise of their country, and they feel like they should be number one. And the Chinese Communist Party, which we look at now and point out, is herding people into concentration camps in Xinjiang province, the Uyghurs, and the NBA controversy around while they'll condemn our cops, but they won't condemn Chinese concentration camps. That's how brave the NBA is. But while all that's going on, what has really been our pushback against this? What have we been willing to do? What have we been willing to say? The answer is very little, until Trump came along. So now they don't like this. They don't like that we're going to start arresting. They're basically spies. They're running spies. One person was found out because she had a Chinese People's Liberation Army uniform photo online, but she had showed up at a U.S. university and was, trying to find out about like bioweapon defense or something. Interesting. That was what the story here said. And it's also why we've had to shut down Chinese consulates recently. They are stealing like crazy from every aspect of American corporate and government society, government areas. And we're finally now pushing back on it, and we got to get ready for the consequences. They're going to start detaining Americans, and the tensions are going to ratchet up. Twitter removes tweets from Trump coronavirus advisor that undermined the importance of masks. That's right. Dr. Scott Atlas, who's on the president's coronavirus task force, he retweeted something which I immediately read. But he tweeted a link to an article, and his comment on it was, "Masks work? No." And then CNN here has, followed by a series of misrepresentations about the science behind the effectiveness of masks in combating the pandemic. Friends, There is absolutely not a single solid, peer-reviewed, controlled study that shows a high level of efficacy in combating the pandemic through mask mandates. Remember, the issue here is of the mandate. You want to wear a mask all day. Sleep with it on, I don't care. But as a government policy, to make sure people have to do this because they're so sure that this is going to do all these great things, well, it's increasingly clear that that's not true. It's not true. How true is it? I don't know. How effective are they? But Dr. Scott Atlas of Stanford University certainly thinks that there's an issue here. And he thinks it's worth addressing, thinks it's something that we should at least be willing to talk about. Shouldn't there be some openness in all of this? Shouldn't there be some honesty? No, of course not. You're not allowed to do any of that. In fact, we're all supposed to think that St. Fauci has all the answers here, that St. Fauci is the guy who will get things done. And just remember, he's a Democrat, folks, and he wants Joe Biden to win. And we all know that he's a CNN watcher and he loves Chris Cuomo. I mean, the evidence is very high that we know exactly who this guy is. A government bureaucrat who's seized the limelight, has been wrong all along, and thinks his job is to say, I'm sorry about all the misinformation out there, but the mitigation efforts we're going to be amazing. It's going to save us all. It's going to be great. Yeah, not so much. He even referred to a super spreader event, talking about the Rose Garden ceremony for ACB. Play 8.
Were you surprised that President Trump got sick? Absolutely not. I was worried that he was going to get sick when I saw him in a completely precarious situation of crowded, no separation between people, and almost nobody wearing a mask. When I saw that on TV, I said, oh my goodness, nothing good can come out of that. That's got to be a problem. And then sure enough, it turned out to be a super spreader event.
A super spreader event. There you go. There's Fauci calling it a super spreader event. Has Fauci ever called any of the BLM protests a super spreader event? I just want to know why. Because the left-wing woke politics is a protection from the virus, as we know from our own media. And if you're left-wing, if you're a Biden voting Democrat who's out there protesting injustice, yeah, you aren't at the same risk, and certainly aren't putting other people at risk. Remember, that's how they really turn the screws on you to get you to comply with all these policies. It's not about you. Yeah, maybe you think you should be able to determine your own risk profile. It's about all the other people. You're putting other lives at risk. I mean, how do you get around that? How do you deal with that? No, you're just supposed to obey. And that's what we know the game is here. You are supposed to obey. You are not allowed to question. You're not allowed to wonder why it is they've been wrong so many times on this one. Fauci in particular. And while people are out there, talking about how Trump would have saved so many lives and been so much better if he'd only listen to the scientists, just remember that now they're trying to claim that Trump is the reason for the lockdowns, too. Here's Governor Pritzker of Illinois. Play 5.
Frankly, the president has made it nearly impossible for states to open up any more than they are now. We have, this pandemic has been around now for 7 to 8 months, and without much help from the federal government, we've been fighting it off. Illinois has one of the lowest positivity rates among the Midwest, but we're bordered by Wisconsin, where he was speaking, which has a 27% positivity rate. Ours is about a fourth of that. We're bordered by Iowa, we're bordered by Indiana. All three of those are in the top 7 or 8 states for positivity rates. So it is dangerous right now. We want people to wear masks. We want people to socially distance. We need to make sure that we have certain mitigations in place. And of course, we've already opened up much of our economy, but we have to maintain certain capacity limits and make sure that our people are safe and healthy.
Illinois has been one of the worst hit places by COVID, but really the problem are the states around it. That's what you're supposed to believe. So the problem is that the lockdowns are also... So they demand the lockdowns and say that Trump won't do the lockdowns to keep us safe, but then they will also turn around and say the lockdowns are Trump's fault somehow. All the bad things are Trump's fault. And since we're in that part of the world, we're in Illinois, might as well talk about Governor Whitmer, who's still going around. She really got used to being in the spotlight for a few weeks there over her unconstitutional by the state of Michigan lockdowns. And now, because of this plot against her life, which we're finding out more was pushed largely by some FBI informant, and that these guys are a bunch of psycho losers. It's not a surprise. But this plot against her, we have to keep hearing about it, because it's not just that this was a bunch of bad people that should be punished. No. That would be too straightforward. Somehow it's all, you know the answer. It is all, in fact, Trump's fault. Play 11.
You know, it's incredibly disturbing that the president of the United States, 10 days after a plot to kidnap, put me on trial and execute me, 10 days after that was uncovered, the president is at it again and inspiring and incentivizing and inciting this kind of domestic terrorism. It is wrong. It's got to end. It is dangerous, not just for me and my family, but for public servants everywhere who are doing their jobs and trying to protect their fellow Americans. People of goodwill on both sides of the aisle need to step up and call this out and bring the heat down. This is the United States of America. We do not tolerate actions like he is giving comfort to, and that's why we all have to be in this together.
This is somebody who's a representative of the political party that terrorized dozens of American cities all summer with riots and looting on a whim. That's right, a Democrat. But now the issue, look at how quickly they turn this around. The issue of political violence, just in time for the election, is a Republican issue. Just in time for people to cast their ballots, there are all these stories out there and all these Democrat politicians who are saying, why can't we all just be more respectful of each other? And we need to condemn violence and not give aid and comfort to extremists. Their party was effectively run by, dictated to, when it comes to extremists for months. Oh, where are all the great changes from the BLM movement? You notice you don't hear much about it anymore. What did BLM do exactly? Just Democrat base mobilization. Didn't achieve anything. Didn't make anything better for anyone. There was nothing about BLM that you would point to now and say, oh, yeah, I'm so glad they accomplished that. Now everybody is safer and better off, or anyone is safer and better off. Remember my analysis from a few months ago? Black Lives Matter movement would make everything worse for everyone, and it did. Nothing was improved. Nothing got better. Oh, whatever happened to defund police? They were so sure that that was something we had to hear about. They were so sure that that was a righteous cause. Why aren't they? We're going into an election. Shouldn't the American people know about defunding cops? It's not just Biden. Shouldn't all these Democrats running for the House or for the Senate, shouldn't they be out there telling everybody about how much they support the righteous idea of defunding police? Wait a second. Do you mean to tell me that the Democrats are changing what they stand for in the height of an election cycle, or pretending that they've changed what they stand for just because they want to get votes? And they know that if people really understood what the Democrats really believe, the leadership of the Democrat Party, the DNC wants, they would not want to vote for these lunatics? Yeah. That's exactly what's going on here. That's exactly what we are seeing play out. And I've just got to say, I'm troubled that this is able to happen at a time when the media is supposed to be focused on just bringing us the truth, right? It's an election, our democracy, all that, that's all crap. That's all nonsense. So yeah, all of a sudden, defunding cops, BLM, don't hear about that. And the political violence that was running rampant on the left for months, businesses looted, burned down, destroyed, cops murdered by Biden supporters who were BLM connected. Does anyone hear about that anymore? Where are all those news stories? Whatever happened to that? Did any of the Democrats condemn it? Trump is always being asked to condemn white supremacy, and he does over and over. Why isn't Gretchen Whitmer, Biden, the whole group, all those Democrats, why aren't they being asked? Do you disavow Antifa? Do you disavow BLM? Well, I think we all know the answer is that no, they won't do those things. That's why they aren't asked. The same reason that they don't keep pressing Biden on court packing. He has been asked it, but he should be asked it every time he shows up anywhere because he just won't answer the question. They don't want to ask about Antifa and Black Lives Matter. And with Black Lives Matter, he would just talk about, he would slip into the talking points about how the movement is righteous, even if some people sometimes step out of line, but they don't represent the movement, right? Some crap like that. No surprise.
Under the Biden lockdown, the lights of Reno and Las Vegas were extinguished. Carson City will become a ghost town. If he comes in, Carson City will become a ghost town. And the Christmas season will be canceled. Look, remember I said we're going to bring back Christmas, right? The name? Remember? We brought it back, right? Remember? I used to go around saying we will bring, because I saw these big department stores, you know, they thought it was politically correct. So they say, have a great season. I said, no, I don't want to have a great season. I want to say Merry Christmas. Say Merry Christmas.
Biden will cancel Christmas. The Grinch. Joe Biden, the Grinch. Doesn't really go with his whole, aw, shucks. Oh, gosh, just one of the guys with my lunch pail and my overalls, leaving my mansion in Delaware on the Acela every day to go to D.C. to make sure that I get enough pork for my donors. That's the real Joe Biden. But no, the guy that you've been hearing about is a real fighter for truth, justice, and the average guy. Blue-collar average Joe. It's all such a fraud. I think that's really one of the reasons that the people who complain about Trump as a person all the time, I have no ability to take them particularly seriously if they support Joe Biden, because Trump is honest about who he is. I can handle that. I really appreciate that kind of honesty. Joe Biden is just is a fraud. I mean, he's a caricature of a politician. Whatever he's got to say, whoever he's got to be in that moment, and whatever bill he's got to push to maximize the political power and benefits that Joe Biden gets, and perhaps even his family. If we find out that this guy was getting kickbacks, it's all over. But you know what? The media. Can you imagine going in? That would be a hilarious experiment, very illuminating too. If you could be a reporter in a national kind of newspaper, and you wanted to walk in and to ask your news editor, "Hey, I really want to follow this lead. I think I can track down that there were payments made to Joe Biden from Hunter Biden from one of the LLCs that he set up." I think you'd be fired. I think they would find a reason. They wouldn't fire you for that. They'd call you into HR and say that, you know, you cursed in a meeting or something and somebody was triggered by it, but you'd be gone. That's how much the journos want to get to the truth. That's how much they really want to make sure they're doing their jobs of bringing it straight to the American people. Such absurdity. We all know it. Absolutely ridiculous. And that's not only does Trump point out Joe Biden, the president, the problems that he would be as president for COVID and lockdown reasons, but also the left really has an ideological fervor around hating fossil fuels. I mean, it just keeps getting worse. The more wrong they're proven about fracking has been a godsend for this country. And as I've described before, it's a technology that's been around for a long time, but it's now used in over 90%, I think it might even be 98% of wells in this country use some form of fracking. It's a safe, much more efficient way to extract a whole lot more natural gas and oil out of these wells. And the left has been saying, oh my gosh, it's going to poison everyone. It's all a lie. I mean, it's all nonsense. We've turned into an energy superpower, and they want that to stop. They want, at this point, where we've all had, and you can't even really feel what a benefit this is. You'd have to sit and think about it. Your electricity bill is lower. The transportation cost for products to your grocery store, lower. The cost of everything in your life, basically, is lower than it would otherwise be because energy costs are lower. Now, remember, 50% of oil, of petroleum, goes to cars, and 50% goes to products and transportation. I'm sorry, products. Transportation would be part of cars. But 50% goes to products in stuff that you use all the time. necessary for the manufacturing of stuff that you're using. So the left, because they just reject economics and replace it with this religion of redistribution, Marxism, a kind of neo-Marxism, they don't really understand all the benefits and don't really care. And Trump understands that that's going to be a big problem for us. Play 20.
He wants to terminate our newfound energy independence, and that's what he wants to do. He wants to end fracking. Do you ever see this guy? For a year and a half, there will be no fracking, no fracking, no fracking. Then he goes to a great place, Pennsylvania, and they say, by the way, we have 1 million jobs for fracking. Oh, we will have fracking. We will have. And the fake news doesn't even talk to him about it. They don't ask him, well, how come for a year and a half you said there's no fracking? And then as soon as you get the nomination, you say there's fracking.
Good question, isn't it? The kind of thing that you would want national news journos to ask, right? But we all know that's not going to happen. Wait, Joe Biden, why did you say one very clear thing when you're running in the Democrat primary, and now when you want the American people in a general to vote for you, you completely abandon that thing you were saying before? That feels kind of dishonest. Why were you doing that? Because this entire candidacy is premised on being able to change whatever you said, whatever you believed then, into something else now that's more useful. Yes, that's the good old earnest Joe Biden for you.